Title: Rethinking the Fermi Paradox, the Silence of the Stars and the Mirror of Reason, or The Silence That Bites, on Alien Minds and Human Mirrors. 1. Of all the things that keep a philosopher awake. Of all the things that might keep a philosopher awake at night, moral decay, logical paradoxes, improperly shelved books, perhaps none is so unsettling, so cosmically impolite as the silence of the stars. For surely, if the universe is as ancient as the physicists claim, and as fecund with planets as their instruments now insist, then intelligent life, self-reflective, rational, perhaps even fond of tea, should have emerged many times over. And yet, in all our centuries of skyward staring, we've heard precisely nothing. No visitors, no emissaries, no galactic postcards, just the cold, undifferentiated hum of indifference. The so-called Fermi paradox is born from this eerie disconnect between probabilistic expectation and empirical disappointment. But before we let our existential dread spiral into metaphysical melodrama, let us proceed with the clinical detachment of a Kantian surgeon and examine what, exactly, we are presupposing when this silence strikes us as surprising. 2. The luggage of presupposition. What makes it a paradox? In the noble tradition of making mountains out of metaphysical molehills, let us catalogue the quiet a priori assumptions, our conceptual carry-ons, so to speak, that we smuggle into this paradox under the guise of common sense. A. The assumption of endurance. First, we assume that intelligence, once evolved, tends to endure. This is generous. Human history, replete with inquisitions, climate denial, and the TikTok algorithm, offers precious little empirical support for this optimism. The idea that civilizations naturally evolve towards star-hopping rationality rather than imploding into post-phenomenological ash is touching. It is also, shall we say, not strictly empirical. B. The assumption of communicative desire. Second, we assume not only that intelligence survives, but that it wants to talk. We expect that alien minds are not merely epistemically competent, but also cosmically extroverted, that they yearn for contact, like desperate romantics in a radio telescope cafe, whispering sweet mathematical nothings into the void. Perhaps they have seen us, ran a spectral scan, checked our emissions and said, "No thanks, they're still microwaving fish at the office." Maybe they caught a rerun of The Masked Singer, mistook it for a diplomatic ritual, and logged Earth as a Class 4 absurdity zone. Or worse, they watched our elections, saw who we sometimes choose as leaders, and concluded we treat intelligence like a decorative myth, nice in theory, but not for everyday use. C. The assumption of a shared epistemic grammar. Third, and most subtly, we assume a shared metaphysical grammar, that the categories structuring our experience, space, time, causality, objecthood, are not merely ours, but somehow theirs as well. We expect that any intelligent being will navigate space, ask questions, use tools, and think symbolically. We presume, with an odd kind of naivety, that they would regard our signals not as galactic spam, but as a sincere handshake from a fellow rational agent. But this is to presume that the a priori conditions of our cognition are universalizable. It is to smuggle a Kantian ego into the cosmos, dress it in star-studded robes, and feel betrayed when the heavens don't wave back. 3. Intelligence and the mirror test of the mind. Herein lies the deeper issue. We are not simply looking for intelligence in itself, we are looking for ourselves dressed up in alien skin. We are attempting to identify intelligence by detecting resemblance, by seeing in the other a distorted echo of our own monadic reflection. As Quine might wryly point out, even here on Earth, Gavagai gives us trouble. Imagine, then, the interpretive acrobatics required to translate a signal from a being whose sensory modalities, logical syntax, and referential frameworks may be as alien to ours as ours are to an oyster. The real question may not be, where are they, but rather, would we even recognize them if they came? We're not just seeking minds, we're seeking minds that cohere with our epistemology, beings fluent in our semantics, tractable to our taxonomies, and answerable to our craving for structure. This, dear reader, is the Fermi paradox through a transcendental lens, not a crisis of cosmic absence, but of epistemic self-importance. Four, Leibniz against Hume, the drift toward resemblance. And yet, what if our hope for resemblance is not mere narcissism, but a metaphysical necessity? Enter Leibniz, quietly polishing the principle of sufficient reason in the corner. Against Hume's empirical despair, Leibniz would remind us, nothing happens without a reason. The universe is not a cosmic Rube Goldberg machine of accidents and habit. It is a rational architecture in motion, every event rooted in a deeper logic, every being a reflection of intelligibility's persistent hum. In this light, resemblance is not a vain projection, but an ontological trajectory. Intelligence does not merely emerge, it converges, it refines, it drifts toward form, toward recognition, toward the kinds of patterns that can be known not just to themselves, but to one another. Cognition, for Leibniz, is monadic, each mind a windowless node reflecting the universe in its own way. But these reflections are not chaotic, they are harmonized. And in a pre-established harmony, even the most alien intelligence, evolved on a world of methane seas and ultraviolet reason, would not be wholly other. It would share, not our biology, but our rational vocation. If the universe is governed by principles, logical, mathematical, moral, then intelligence should not be a freak occurrence, but a tendency inscribed into the grain of things. Where there is sufficient complexity and time, the drift should be not merely toward survival, but toward recognition, toward mutual intelligibility. Thus, our most extravagant imaginings, our Kantian aliens, our Platonist squid, our Leibnizian AI angels, are not empty fictions, but projections of what reason must become, given the conditions of its own flowering. In this view, the universe is not a silence, but a score we haven't yet learned how to read. Five, the vindication of Fermi and the paradox that eats itself. This is why Fermi was not naive. He was not a child shaking the galactic present box and crying when it didn't rattle. He was a rationalist, perhaps not as baroque as Leibniz, but cut from similar cloth, asking, if the orchestra is rehearsing all around us, why can't we hear the music? If intelligences must arise, and if reason tends toward articulation, then surely the universe ought to be ringing with attempts at mutual recognition. They should be out there, and they should, eventually, look back. But, and here lies the twist worthy of a metaphysical noir, the paradox, once sharpened, turns against Fermi himself. If the world must produce mirrored minds, and if communication is a rational inevitability, then the fact that we are met with cosmic silence is not just puzzling, it is devastating. The more we accept the preconditions for expecting contact, the more damning their absence becomes. Perhaps we are not the ones discovering the silence. Perhaps the silence is discovering us. Perhaps we are the breakdown, the epistemic cul-de-sac, the monads whose internal reflection fails to harmonize with the symphony of being. Now, it must be said, the more conservative responses to the Fermi paradox, those that appeal to sheer scale, to the vast gulfs between stars, to the tyranny of relativistic constraints, are not without merit. They remind us that physics has its laws, and even the most determined intelligence may be defeated by the square-cube law or the speed of light. But such responses do not discourage the Leibnizian mind. For the rationalist, physical difficulty is not a sufficient reason. It is a delay, not a denial. If the structure of the cosmos is one of resemblance, then our problems are their problems. And if it is ever possible to overcome those problems, be it through communication, colonization, or even time travel, then that solution, once discovered anywhere, would have always existed. In a Leibnizian universe, where possibility and necessity blur in the best of all possible worlds, the far edge of the galaxy is not fundamentally different from our own backyard. If there is intelligence out there, structured like ours, then it is only a matter of time, or rather, a matter of when time becomes irrelevant. Sixth, conclusion. Who are we looking for, really? In the end, the Fermi paradox may not be a question about extraterrestrial intelligence at all. It may be something far more disquieting, a mirror turned inward, reflecting not the absence of others, but the architecture of our own expectation. It reveals our metaphysical cravings, our desire for cosmic kinship, our yearning to see intelligence not merely as possible, but as recognizable. It shows how quickly we mistake the lighthouse of reason, steady, structured, for a lantern we carry in the fog, illuminating only what we're prepared to see. Whether one leans toward metaphysical optimism or empirical caution, the Fermi paradox remains a rare kind of question, one that unsettles not because of what it reveals, but because of what it reflects. Perhaps the real discovery lies not in what we find among the stars, but in how we choose to frame the silence between them. I invite you to reflect, to question, and, if you're inclined, to share your thoughts below. What do you make of this mirror we've cast into the cosmos? Is it revealing their absence or our assumptions? And if you enjoyed this journey through ideas, metaphysics, and cosmic silence, consider leaving a like or supporting our work through the donation link on the page. Every bit helps keep these reflections alive and expanding. Let's keep the conversation open. After all, even in silence, there is something waiting to be said.
Listening to the Silence, Wittgenstein, Heidegger, and the Fermi Paradox. Welcome back. If you survived part 1 with your cosmic optimism still intact, congratulations, you may be eligible for some kind of philosophical insurance. This is part 2 of our exploration of the Fermi Paradox, or, as it's starting to feel, a slow-motion existential documentary about why the universe might not be ghosting us at all, but why we might be talking nonsense from the start. Think of this as less 7 minutes of philosophy and more 7 light years of therapy. Bring snacks, bring humility, because this time we're not just scanning the skies, we're listening, not just for distant civilizations, but for the cracks in our own assumptions. And 2 unlikely companions, Ludwig Wittgenstein and Martin Heidegger, have already left us maps. Strange, incomplete, cryptic maps, written in languages nobody fully speaks anymore, but still, maps. So let's follow them, even if it's only to discover just how lost we really are. Of course, it's easy to imagine the Fermi paradox as a detective story gone wrong, a cosmic whodunit, where the prime suspect extraterrestrial intelligence simply refuses to show up at the trial. But perhaps we have been looking at the mystery through the wrong end of the telescope. Somewhere in the smoke-filled cafes of early 20th century thought, Ludwig Wittgenstein was already raising a skeptical eyebrow. For him, the real danger wasn't that we hadn't heard from the aliens. It was that we might be trapped in a confusion of our own making. Prisoners of a grammar stretched far beyond its natural habitat. The limits of what can be said, he warned, are not the same as the limits of what is. Sometimes silence is not failure. It's the only honest response. Meanwhile, over in the Black Forest, metaphorically and literally, Martin Heidegger was busy diagnosing an even deeper ailment. He suspected that modern humanity's thirst for answers was built on a forgotten ruin, the unspoken background of being itself. We broadcast signals into the abyss, but what we fail to notice is that our very understanding of signals, contact, and communication is stitched together from assumptions we no longer see, or even question. In other words, the stars are not silent because they are empty. They are silent because we have misunderstood what it means to listen. Continuation. Wittgenstein and the finite symbolism of infinity. Now, before you accuse philosophy of overcomplicating a simple question, where are the aliens? Let's be clear. Sometimes overcomplication is the point. Ludwig Wittgenstein, with the same calm ferocity he brought to dismantling half of Western philosophy, once hinted that maybe, just maybe, the very tools we use to reach out to the stars, our words, our concepts, our logic, are themselves finite fishing nets thrown into an infinite sea. As Paul Livingston reminds us, Wittgenstein saw something deeply humbling. Even when we talk about the infinite, about endless sequences, galaxies beyond measure, civilizations teeming across the cosmos, we do so using finite signs, finite rules, finite games. No matter how grand the vistas we imagine, they must pass through the narrow customs of our grammar, our practices, our learned techniques. Even the idea of infinity, when spoken, is just another move in a finite game. It's not that infinite possibilities don't exist, it's that our access to them always comes wearing the uniform of the finite. So when we stare into the silent universe and demand an answer, a signal, a knock, a whisper from beyond, maybe we're like chess players demanding the board itself to respond. Perhaps the silence is not a cosmic insult. Perhaps it's grammar, quietly reminding us of its own reach and its own limit. And that's the thing. Deep down, we can't stand that. We're wired to want some big universal system, some neat little box, to make sense of the crazy mess that is reality. We crave it. It's like we hate the idea that life might just be chaotic and not perfectly organized underneath it all. One form this craving takes is the inductive mechanical view of language, the belief that, underlying the messy surface of speaking, there must exist a strict syntactic engine, a formal mechanical structure from which meaning is inductively reconstructible. This dream takes formal shape in Church's thesis that all calculable functions are, in their deepest nature, computable by a Turing machine. It is the ancient hope, recast in mathematical steel, that thought itself could be mechanized, that there is, somewhere, a universal syntax binding all acts of reason, all gestures of recognition, all utterances of being, and thus the Fermi paradox takes on its more tragic dimension. When we scan the silence of the stars, we smuggle in the expectation that alien minds would speak. If not our words, then at least our logics. If not our histories, then our mathematics. We dream of a cosmic Church-Turing grammar, a universal language of thought. But reason itself may be provincial, parochial, a fragile contingency of this earth, this biology. The silence is not merely absence, it is the vertigo that there may be no common speech between intelligences, no bridge from our finitude to their otherness. It is not simply that the stars refuse to answer, it is that we may not even possess the grammar in which a reply could be heard. Continuation. Listening to the silence, Heidegger and the Fermi paradox. We began by seeing how the dream of a mechanical, universal syntax, a dream mirrored in Church's thesis, seduces us into thinking that language, thought, even life itself, must obey recognizable forms. We saw Wittgenstein resist this dream. Meaning is not machinery beneath the surface. It is woven into practices, lives, histories. But there is a deeper unease here, a deeper darkness behind the silence of the stars. And to enter it, we must turn to Heidegger. In Being and Time, Heidegger warns us, the fundamental error of modern thought is to treat being as though it were a thing, a stockpile, a repository, a set of available facts waiting to be picked up by any rational mind. We treat being like a library that all intelligences could browse, provided they know the language. But what if being is not like that at all? What if being withdraws? What if it only grants itself partially, temporarily, shaped by the finite historical conditions of our existence? For Heidegger, Dasein, our being there, is not a universal vantage point. It is a thrown, finite, situated way of being. Our understanding of beings is always already shaped by the horizon of meaning that belongs to our specific historical epoch, our practices, even our failures. Thus, the Fermi paradox, the silence of the stars, is not simply a statistical puzzle, it is an ontological mirror. It reveals that our assumption that other forms of intelligence would present themselves to us within our existing frameworks of recognition is itself provincial. We project our own metaphysical grammar onto the cosmos. We expect beings to manifest themselves as objects within our cognitive light. We expect them to say, "Here we are," in a syntax we can decipher. But being may not give itself that way. The silence may not be the absence of intelligence. It may be the refusal of being to become objectifiable, available, under the conditions we have set. The cosmic silence may be less like an unanswered call, and more like an unreadable riddle uttered in a tongue we cannot even recognize as language. Thus, Heidegger forces us to rethink the deepest premise of the Fermi question. It is not merely whether there are others, it is whether the very notion of recognizing another is a capacity grounded in being itself, or only in the narrow horizon of human Dasein. And perhaps, as Heidegger hints in his later work, it is only by learning to listen differently, listening not for signals that confirm our frameworks, but for the ways being itself withdraws and discloses, that we might begin to hear the speech of what now seems like silence. Until then, the silence of the stars is not a sign of absence. It is a sign of our finitude, and it may be the most eloquent thing the cosmos has ever said. Conclusion. Thus, we have wandered, as all respectable philosophers must, from slabs and builders to the cosmic silence of interstellar space. We have seen how the craving for mechanical certainty, for a universal syntax of meaning, haunts our philosophies of language, our dreams of computation, even our hopes of cosmic kinship. We have seen Wittgenstein caution us, meaning is not a secret machine, but a tangled, finite practice. We have seen Heidegger warn us, being is not a library of facts waiting for recognition. It grants and withholds itself as it pleases. And so, confronted by the silence of the stars, we must admit, with a mixture of humility and grim amusement, that the universe may not only be stranger than we suppose, but stranger than we are even able to suppose. Not absent, not empty, merely indifferent to our craving for recognition. In short, the cosmos owes us nothing, not even an intelligible hello. And if you found that idea as delightfully unsettling as I did, consider offering a small, earthbound form of recognition, a like, a comment, or an inscription to our humble channel. After all, it may be the only form of intelligent contact we reliably achieve this week. Until next time, keep your telescopes ready and your expectations modest.